morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. I think it's going to be an interesting one on building trust through inclusive ESG. Thank you, Dato' and Jitnik. Just to set the background of what has happened with the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously it's changed the way we work, it's changed the way we look at many issues around us, including the environment, social issues, people who have been impacted by the pandemic. And obviously, there's been a shift in how investors are also, and also consumers are looking at how companies are dealing with COVID and dealing with issues like ESG. And basically, it's thrust a lot of the companies worldwide for the need to adapt more sustainable practices to avoid being financially impacted over the long run, as investors are now putting more focus on ESG adaptability as a whole. My first question to our two esteemed speakers is, what do you see as the BOD or C-suite executives' roles in developing this value creation strategy on ESG? And how does embedding ESG factors increase long-term shareholder value, especially as we as a nation are moving into the endemic phase? Maybe we can start with Nick.
Okay, thank you very much, Jasmine, and also thank you to the organizer for inviting me to speak today, and also thank you very much for listening to us. I think your question is what should they do? I can give two perspectives. One from the regulatory guidance perspective, Malaysia Code of Corporate Governance, and number two in terms of the strategic objective, because if we look at the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance, the revised version that was issued, sometime this year, a couple of months ago, it's very interesting because it emphasizes a lot more the word sustainability into the code. Now, the word sustainability is not new; it has always been in the Malaysia Code of Corporate Governance, but it's it's stronger now. Specifically, it talks about how the boards need to do a number of things. Number one, they need to provide oversight in terms of sustainability issues, in terms of risks and opportunities, linking it with the strategy. Number two, they need to have awareness. Number three, they need to communicate to their stakeholders in terms of what are the sustainability activities that they do. And number four, very interestingly, it talks about KPI and performance management. They need to embed it into the KPI, which is quite new. So going forward, if you follow the code, it's not just KPI, it's not just about profitability and the rest of it. You will also be assessed in terms of how well you manage sustainability risks and opportunities. So that is the first perspective from the industry guidance. But number two, that I would say is sustainability is good business. Because if you look at our economic environment, not just Malaysia, but the whole world is changing towards facilitating sustainability. So as a matter of fact, if we look at some of the agreements and some of the discussions that have been happening in COP26, people are talking about carbon tax, people are talking about various incentives, which means that companies and organizations who don't adapt to it will find themselves in a position of disadvantage. Those who adapt, will become more profitable and more robust. So as a board member and senior management, of course, it's very important to be aware of those issues and react accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To answer the questions, as for me, through my experience, we are the holding concession owner for KLCC, the KLIA 1, KLIA 2, Penang Airport, and also the new one is TRX. Now, when we operate our blue taxi, people may say it's only a taxi, okay? But it is beyond than a taxi, because we don't get our taxi to drive around the city and wait for people to call them, because it's a system. And our system been recognized by the relevant authorities and they follow our system. Now, that's one. When the pandemic came in, coincident, all our taxis already 10 years old. So the government says, no more renewal. You must change to a new taxi. At the same time, we also got obligation to fulfill the commitment that we have with our asset owner, which is the Twin Tower and the rest of it. So what we did was, we are lucky because we have a small board of director and who understand the business. Why they understand the business? Because we pick them out. We pick them up from where they started in taxi industry. Yeah? To share with you, one of my board directors are taxi driver. So I took him out, I trained him up, and now he became the board, he became the director of operation from a taxi driver. So when the pandemic came, we were stuck. We were stuck tremendously. We got no more car, 85,000 car gone. We have to negotiate back with the asset owner of the situation because we have 20 more years to go. So our contract has been renewed every 10 years. So total contract concession is 30 years for each asset. Okay. We are lucky, as I said to you, that we have a good, small, good, experienced board of directors. They are not accountants, they are not auditors, but they are we took them from the roots. They know A to Z about the industry. So we've been training them for more than 10 years. So when the pandemic came in, I don't do the job. The board do the job because the board understand the industry. So they go and renegotiated back the concession because of the situation. So that is very important. The board must understand the business and they must have the vast experience in the industry that the company goes in. No point you take other board, but they don't understand. No point. So the board must understand what they're doing, what the company is doing. They go renegotiate the concession. So our concession still go on. Even though we don't have car, the board managed to negotiate, make the asset owner understand how and why need to be kept KIV for time being until we relaunch back the whole thing. So that's the board duty to me.
So they were able to adapt to the new circumstances and being able to renegotiate fast. Yeah.
Yes, because they understand. They understand. Whenever there's a question coming from the asset owner, they know what to answer. And the answer that they give is facts. Like now, we're facing problem with all the banks in Malaysia because all the banks are not giving any financing or facilities to company like us because to them it's high risk. Transportation is high risk for time being. So we negotiated back with the government. And because of our experience, our expertise, our result that we have shown the government, the asset owner, the GLC that we attached to, we managed to get the soft loan from the government to restart back. So important is the board must understand. No matter how big the company, no matter how small the company, the board and the CEO must understand. No point you having a CEO that very clever, but the board is not clever. Or you have a board clever, CEO not clever. Both must be tally.
Okay. Also looking at in an era where good corporate citizenship is becoming a norm, reporting on ESG-related issues is also fast becoming a common practice among major listed companies. For these companies, the annual report is the key communication tool, usually, to disclose sustainability practices, as you had mentioned, Nick, to stakeholders. Companies that are not proactive in communicating their ESG practices will miss an opportunity to craft what their own sustainability initiatives are. They will then lose competitive advantage, and investors would probably turn to third-party sources to get verification of what these companies may be doing. So whether it's the perception or reputation issues, things like that. And they will make their own assessment if the company doesn't provide such information. My question is, what are your thoughts on the impacts of integrated reporting on decision making in an organization? Why is sustainability reporting important to companies in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you very much, Jasvin. Very good question. So let's tackle the topic about, let's look at it conceptually from the perspective of disclosures. Disclosures are important. Why? Because a lot of people want to know what's going on in the company. So especially if you look at it from the perspective of institutional investors, if you are a listed entity, many institutional investors in Malaysia, if you look at EPF, QAP, PNB, Khazanah, and many others, all in one way or another have released statements to say that they will take sustainability, as a priority, and they will embed that as part of their decision-making process, which means that in principle, companies which are not considered to be sustainability friendly, may risk getting, may risk having their share price going down. So that's why disclosures are important. Number two is which disclosures to use. You mentioned integrated reporting. There are many disclosure frameworks out there, GRI, TCFD, SASB, and so on. But in my point of view, all of these disclosure standards, they aim to go to the same thing, is to provide better disclosure. Almost all of them, talk about you need to disclose how you govern things, how you actually embed sustainability into your risk management, in terms of how you embed it as part of your strategy process, and also setting targets and also metrics. So by having all of that, regardless of which framework you use, be it TCFD or integrated reporting and so on, in principle, it will help organizations, number one, not just to disclose better, but also to have them align their thought process from the strategy to the process to the results.
Sustainability, for me, for us, we are different. We look at different way. Because our business are not like others, like oil and gas, things like that. They need a lot of strategy. They need a lot of planning, research, a lot. For us, it's very straightforward. But nevertheless, due to the technology transformation, it affects our operation. For example, for the KLIA, they have given us an instruction to upgrade the system. They like our system, but they say transform your manual system into automated. Okay, so we are looking at technology to sustain our operation. We don't have much strategy that we need to plan, because only transportation, number two, enforcement, number three is to make sure that our passengers, our customer, when they take our services, when they click the button, they are secure. So in order to move on to sustain another 20 years, 30 years, we have invested 50 million to transform our manual operation into a digitalized technology system. Meaning, we still have a manpower to operate at the operation center, but we'll be reducing it to 50%. And when we reduce the 50%, we got balance out of job 50%. So we would train them to be a limousine driver, means an executive level. So they will become an executive level limousine driver. We will upgrade their position. Number one, in order to make sure that the operation and the company sustain, the most important is the people that work for you. If let's say you want to reduce your operation manpower and you don't chuck them away by holding a jobless title. So what you need to do is you need to find a way to maintain them or to upgrade them so that your service can be much more better, because they already have the experience and knowledge. Okay, That is our role in terms of taxi industry or transport industry. Secondly, about the enforcement, the risk. That is our core business. Okay, you can take my taxi, you can sleep at the back while waiting for you to arrive at your destination. Nothing will go wrong with you, because we have managed the risk to sustain our business. Just to share with both of you and the rest of the delegates, during the pandemic, if we have cars on the road which is not expired, we will not be collapsed, because we already have more than 2 million loyal customers that call us, use our service every day. 2 million. And because of the pandemic came in and the taxi life gone, we go into the government and we restructure back our services. We tell the government, the Prime Minister, during the Tan Sri Muhyiddin time, we have 85,000 drivers who's not working. The government is giving them 500 ringgit one time. They cannot sustain. We also cannot sustain. So what we did was, we tell the government, we want to take the role of Post Malaysia. Because Post Malaysia has failed to deliver all the government items and documents on time. Plus, some of their delivery boys are using our services. So they don't have a solid, permanent delivery boys to deliver. So we tell the government, you give it to us to take over the services, and we guarantee you the services, and we guarantee you we have 85,000 drivers to service you 24 hours. So we won the contract. We won the contract. That's how for us to sustain our operation, we have to find a new way of using our whatever platform that we have to generate the revenue. We don't have any other strategy like oil and gas, we don't. But when you have the fleet, you have the drivers, every courier company wants you. Every courier company wants you. Do you know that we deliver for DHL? You pay DHL very high, but DHL pay us very low to deliver your item. But you said that DHL is very good service. Actual fact, we deliver for DHL. Today I declare we all. Because we have the solid fleet right until Labis Segamat. So we can guarantee our customers, we can guarantee our client, next day, same day. So in order to continue that, you must maintain your grassroots, means your staff. And the board must understand how to make use the platform that we already have. So the board must have experience.
Okay, that's very insightful. We just concluded COP26, where obviously the key buzzwords were sustainability and climate change. Now, I think, Petra Group also participated and went to Glasgow for the COP26. And what we did find was the increasing call for businesses to step up, because I think there's a more realization that governments can't do this alone. Governments change every 5 years, policies change. So it's time for businesses to inculcate sustainability on a more deeper level into their business practices. For instance, I'll give you an example of how we at Petra Group are doing it as well. In our modular business, we are actually one of the largest modular building construction companies in Asia, outside China. And apart from our factory here in Port Klang, we also have factories in the UK and Australia. And one of the decisions we did to reduce the carbon footprint by as much as 85% was we made the decision to do what we call a factory in a box, and we relocated our manufacturing facilities from, well, not relocated, but we established a new manufacturing facility in the UK to cater for the UK market, rather than shipping from Malaysia to the UK. So if you look at it on a more sustainable level, it makes sense. On a business level, investors start to appreciate the fact that you are making these decisions to reduce the carbon footprint, to use more sustainable products, to use more, recycled products, things like that. My question is, in Malaysia, when we talk about acting responsibly, we know it's no longer a choice, it's an imperative. What is your opinion on the level of ESG policy compliance or even awareness among listed companies in Malaysia?
I think that's quite fairly difficult answer to give a precise number. But what we can observe around the world is sustainability, relatively speaking, is a fairly new topic as compared to other more embedded topics such as governance, stakeholder responsibility, and so on. So I think all over the world, companies and organizations are adapting to sustainability. But I've seen good signs. More and more companies are putting more sustainability disclosures, they are making the right statements, they are making net zero commitment, and so on. So I think overall, I think we still have a journey to make, but I suppose my message is we don't have much time, because if you look at the key reason why COP26 happened, I think in the past, when I was growing up, whenever people talk about sustainability environment, you have the image of, trying to save polar bears from going hungry, or, saving a tree, and the rest of it. But that issue, that narrative has now evolved to something more existential. We are facing a climate catastrophe if we don't do anything, by various study of various peer-reviewed scientists. If we don't do anything, by 2050, the temperature is going to be up by a number of degrees. By the end of the century, it can be up by 3 degrees Celsius. Even though that might not sound much, because of course in a room in an aircon, we turn up and down the Celsius, very easily 2 or 3. But in the context of climate, our organism in this world is so sensitive to climate change in terms of plantations, in terms of sea level, in terms of flooding. Actually, as a matter of fact, within the region, the biggest climate risk in Southeast Asia is actually flooding. And if we can look at what's been happening in our country, occurrences of flooding have been increasing. So this is happening right now. Which is why that, in my personal point of view, even though it's good that many organizations are corporate are taking the right steps, but we need to expedite that further because we are facing a human catastrophe.
I would like to touch on the government direction change every time government change. If we keep on changing the policies whenever the government change, it will make the private sector suffer. No matter how you have your strategy, even though you appoint PwC, you appoint Ernst & Young, you appoint anybody in the world, if the policy keep on changing because the government change, you cannot sustain. You look at Singapore. I love to take Singapore as a model. Today, if the government collapses, the government policy runs automatically by itself. It will not change. Why can't we have that direction? So the more government change, the more private sector, even GLC will be in trouble. So the government should not change policy. If the Prime Minister change, the policy must go on like what they have planned. They have to be autopilot. I'd like to touch on that.
Yes, definitely. I mean, but also for businesses themselves, we need to be have our own internal direction regardless of where the policy goes. We know what the issues are. The problem with Asia, I think, if you compare to the developed markets, obviously the more developed markets talk about climate change, they talk about sustainability, that's become the main topic. But here in Asia, it's still not at the forefront. People are suffering from the pandemic, the economic downturn. People are more worried about putting food on the table than to save the environment. So in this way, I think large corporations in Malaysia, large GLCs, have the capacity to do more to lift communities. So their internal policies within businesses need to be more long-term in terms of lifting the communities, whether it's through vocational training, education, poverty eradication. And only when we can actually do it in a more sustainable way in terms of creating sustainable wealth to lift people out of poverty, regardless of the government, only then I think we can grow our market. And when we grow our market, we as businesses will have a bigger market to make profit out of. So it is a cycle where unless your market grows, only then can you start looking at bigger issues like climate change and social responsibility, social issues, sustainability, things like that. That's what I wanted to add to that point. So in terms of the ESG standards, obviously, Nick, you mentioned about there are already some disclosure requirements, but there are also a lot of ambiguity in terms of the current state of where ESG standards are. Is it more in terms of global recognition or global standardization, or is it standards within Malaysia? And do you think there's a fixed standard for ESG policies going forward? And how does one grapple with the varied interpretations of ESG globally?
Excellent question. But first, I think rather than the word ambiguity, I'd rather use the word, we are now in the phase where the standards are consolidating, because in terms of the standards itself, they are quite clear what they want the people to disclose. I think the issue is we have many standards, but this is not new. Even accounting standards, used to be a lot, and then it consolidated over time. And sustainability standards will happen the same way as well. As a matter of fact, IFRS Foundation recently announced that they are creating ISSB, which is going to be another standard. But my point of view is that there will be more and more standards, but the most important thing for organizations who want to take this seriously is not to be too caught up in terms of which standard to use. Just look at what the standards are trying to achieve. And like I said earlier, across all of those standards, one way or another, they request the companies to disclose how they govern themselves in terms of sustainability issues, how they identify the risks and opportunities, how they embed it into their strategy, how do they communicate it, and how do they set targets. So regardless of whatever standards that you want to call it, those are the key components that should exist if you want to take sustainability seriously. So my suggestion is, to focus on the substance, to embed it as part of your business strategy and direction, and then disclosure. As the standards consolidate, you'll have a choice which one that you want to choose and disclose.
To me, the standards that Encik Nick is talking about, to me, the more standard has been implemented or be recommended to be implemented, it will give difficulty for the company to grow, to me. To others, I don't know, but to me. Because, let's say MOT, if they put on a lot of regulation on our operation, we cannot move. Sometimes their regulation doesn't make sense. So for us, the more the government put, the more the authority put the standards, when the operation and the business should be run friendly, they will give difficulty to the company to maintain the sustainability. Very difficult. I give you an example like my operation in KLIA. The government says the taxi driver can drop passenger. You cannot pick up passenger at one time. You can drop the passenger, you cannot pick up passenger. Isn't that ridiculous? When we have 20,000 taxis there. So these are the standard, one of the standards that we say is ridiculous. So the more you enforce, the more problematic for the company to grow. For me, if let's say you're talking about environmental, like flood, all these trees problem, all this pandemic, for us, we love it. It's opposite, we love it. You know why? During the pandemic, we deliver food. and our drivers, our riders are being taken care of their food. You know, we love, during a pandemic, we love it. Only thing that we don't love it is because we cannot carry passenger. That also another regulation that we fight. You see, the government says transportation can operate because it's a service industry. But they impose one system inside there. One car, one passenger. Isn't it ridiculous? If you want to go market, you ask your wife to go alone. You understand? Take a taxi, go alone. You know, we have some expatriates that have been with us because they know us very well, staying around KLCC, Binjai, all this. Because they know us, they says, can you take this menu and go and buy for me? Because they cannot go out. If they want to go out, also can only go out one person. It's ridiculous. This system is ridiculous. To me, lah. To others, I don't know. Lah. I cannot move on. Even now, we never start our operation in KLCC. Even though we can start. We never start. Why? One passenger, one car. If you come with your family, how? How many cars you have to take? You see, so the standards and the system, sometimes the government has to follow or to implement. It doesn't make sense. And it cannot make the company grow. Yeah, it cannot make sometimes. Corporate, I don't know lah kan.
Yeah, so I guess regulation sometimes is an issue. It
Yes.
impedes businesses.
Yes.
So maybe best practices might be more in terms of sustainability. What are the best practices?
Yes.
Because some companies may want to look at for investors who are conscious about these kind of practices,
Yes, yes.
but others just, have a different priority maybe. So I guess there needs to be a balance between regulation and how do you implement best practices as well, right?
I'll give you one example. I'm sorry to interrupt you. A very good example. When Pakatan Harapan took over the government, they approved Grab as a legalized e-hailing company services. But when they implement the operation of Grab, many of you inside this room doesn't know that the drivers has got no commercial insurance until today. So if you take Grab, if you met an accident, it doesn't cover passenger. So the implementation and the regulation and the system that the government wants to implement when approve something, they didn't think carefully. We were telling we said to the government, we says, you approve Grab as another alternative category of taxi, but the implementation must be the same like limousine, taxi driver. You go to Puspacom, you take a PSV, you have kad memandu. The taxi driver, if you take a taxi in front of the dashboard, there is a kad memandu. But in terms of Grab, what they did was, Puspacom, yes, but private car. Where insurance company wants to give insurance? Private car. It's supposed to be a commercial car. One. Number two, PSV for memandu. Okay, they obtain. Number three, kad memandu. They don't give the kad pemandu. They created another so-called digital kad pemandu called EVP, Electronic Vehicle Permit. Okay? That kad pemandu costs a driver 250 ringgit. And that 250 ringgit is borne by the company like Grab, like us, for the driver. So if the driver don't drive the car, who lose the money? The company. So again, I said, the system is, as you said, the new government come, new policy. New government come, new policy. We cannot work that way. Cannot. I don't know about PwC opinion.
Okay, now looking at Malaysia as a whole, we are looking at things like there are now new corporate governance standards that countries are being assessed on. For instance, Equities First has joined forces with Nasdaq's Governance Solutions to publish a series of research reports on corporate governance for selected markets in APAC. And the rankings of corporate governance of Asian markets by the Asia Corporate Governance Association over the past 2 decades have placed Malaysia between 4th and 7th. The recent political upheavals reversed the upward movement in recent years, obviously, and in the latest ranking, it has resulted in Malaysia in a joint 5th ranking among 12 ASEAN markets. What's your thoughts on this, and what are the strategies for domestic companies in a landscape where there's a call for greater social governance and to get as a guarantee to our stakeholders? What would companies need to do to improve their standards on a global scale, despite the political background?
Dato', would you like to take that?
Yeah, I want to hear your opinion first.
I mean, of course, as professionals, we are apolitical. Our job is to basically look at what is the environment and basically help our clients and the industry to get better. So I think politics are politics, but in term, if going back to your question, how do companies get themselves better in terms of social governance? Is that the question?
Well, I think there's this perception, obviously, that corporate governance standards in Malaysia would obviously affect our ranking on a global scale. So whether it's a regulation issue or whether it's an implementation issue or enforcement issue by the government, and having these companies to actually comply with these corporate governance standards, or do we need to improve the standards, or are our standards good enough? So where do you see the disjoint between what our companies are doing here and how it's being perceived internationally?
I think just like in any countries, there is a spectrum of compliance to the corporate governance standards. I mean, not just in Malaysia, Singapore, China, UK. Some companies, they disclose more. Some companies are strong in corporate governance. Some are weak. I think the most important issue is corporate governance is becoming a strategic importance, not just because for the sake of corporate governance, but because if you are judged and evaluated by a broad range of stakeholders, your shareholders, sometimes regulators, and customers as well. So it's very important to have overall overarching framework in terms of how you want the industry to strengthen the corporate governance framework. In Malaysia, in my point of view, I think our regulators, SC, have been playing a fantastic role in terms of creating the framework. Of course, it is a journey. More can be done in terms of awareness, in terms of strengthening the controls and risk management. But I think it is a journey. Thank you.
In terms of our authorities, I think they become over creative until the company has to follow their rules, and if it is difficult for the company to move on, very difficult. I pity to all the GLC. Whenever they want to do something, the process is tough. You look at US, it's so friendly, So to me, these authorities that impose or implementing new regulation, as simple to say that they are deal breaker. It's very hard to move on, very hard. The one that makes the money, PwC. The company, they don't make the money, very tough. Because too many regulations, not friendly. Not friendly. We have to be a government, friendly regulatory implementation or regulation friendly. I'll give you an example, very simple example. I have a company in Singapore, and as a board member in Singapore company, you are Malaysian, you have to apply for work permit. Do you know how long the work permit issued to me in Singapore? It's less than half an hour. I went to the immigration, I submitted my form, I submitted my passport, I wait for 30 minutes, they interview me for 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then I waited, the visa come out. Look at Malaysia regulation. The implementation to apply for a professional visa, you are allowing other third party to do corruption. You make it so difficult. What else the company lah? a simple thing like that, the company wants to import foreigner, one person to apply for the permit, it takes 6 months. So all this regulation has to be user-friendly.
Can I add a statement, a very quick statement? I think I do understand where Dato is coming from. I think I have 2 statements to make. I think number one, the debate in terms of regulations, are they necessary or not, has been going on for a long time. I think as a matter of principle, personally, I do believe that regulations are important. They are there for a reason. Having said that, I do understand where Dato you're coming from, because I think the topic is too much regulations can be damaging. So then the issue is how much is too much? Is it too little? And so on, right? Which is a matter of opinion. Dato is very clear, you have an opinion. But I do think that regulations are important in terms of principle. My statement number 2 is sometimes when it comes to regulations, yes, any regulations will generate compliance costs, even accounting standards, macam IFRS. You have to pay for it to get the accounts ready, the auditors and so on. But the reason companies do it is because they don't have any choice, because without following the accounting standards, they cannot publish their accounts, and many other regulations, around the world. So when it comes to sustainability, you are right. The more regulations on sustainability, it will create a compliance cost. But I do feel, this is my personal view, the way the world is going, in the future, we may not have any choice. Those standards will become increasingly, more important. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You do need to have standards and some level of compliance to these standards in order to build trust, which is what we're talking about here in terms of ESG. I'd like to now open the floor for questions. If anyone has any questions for our speakers.
I think we've probably covered quite a broad range of issues, Jasmine.
I asked too many questions.
Perhaps, exactly. You asked yourself a very good set of questions. Well done.
But I do think that we cannot run away from the fact that ESG standards are going to be more and more prominent. And if we are looking at raising, companies that are going to go globally, ESG will need to be at the forefront of what board of directors and the C-suites need to think about. Whether you're going to, there's so many investors now that are demanding for these standards. So we have to start inculcating it to the company at this level before we even think about venturing abroad. And even domestically, you're going to see more and more eyes on what you're doing in terms of the environment, social causes, governance. So it's not just about corporate governance, it's not just about the environment, it's about everything. So unfortunately, the cost to business might be higher, but hopefully it will be able to solve a lot of problems for everybody in society. With that, I'd like to thank our 2 speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.